Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Hope everyone is off to a great start to the week. I've been working on several projects, which explains my silence. Anyhow, we have two frequent guests, and they have fantastic new publications. Reverend Michael Carter has a newly published, insightful book of several of his sermons titled Enlightenment. Wallace Wagner has an expanded and revised edition of his debut book, Crossing the Crevasse. It also has a new cover. We'll be getting into the artwork shortly. Nucleus, Wally's Nucleus is the third book in his trilogy, and that should be out later this year. So we'll be drawing from several of their other books. So tonight's another one of those career retrospective shows that is going to cause my desk to collapse with all the books stacked up on it. Quite a few on the floor as well, so I may go through the floor. So if you hear a crashing sound, that's probably what that is. Have some PDFs opened as well, so my computer may blow up. So I think we have lots of exciting information to get into tonight. So let me bring on Michael and Wally. How are you two doing tonight?
Wonderful.
Good to be here. Good
Excellent.
To be here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Wally, you there?
Yeah.
Okay. We're glad you're here as well. So let's start off with Wally. And what was the reason behind the update of your debut book? I don't think anything was wrong with the first version. What was your intent behind republishing Crossing the Crevasse?
Well, I self-proofed it myself, and there were several punctuation errors, so I made some corrections there, and a few spacing errors that corrected. But the real reason, Mark, was because of the picture on the front. It was a red cover with simulation of the white Tic Tac that I saw, and I had gotten multiple comments that people thought that was a dragon and a dragon's eye, which is far from what it was supposed to be. So we revised the front cover and put a typical, shall we say, craft on the front of it, and changed the color to a more modest blue.
Okay. And I really like the artwork. Who was the artist?
Well, Ken Goodsword came up with that. So
okay.
I give him the kudos
I really
for
like
that.
it.
He also did a forward for the book, which I'm appreciative of.
I think you have great content. We can get into maybe crop circles, since we didn't talk about that 2 or 3 years ago when you were a guest, and I think Barbara has a crop circle show coming up. So we will get into the content of that book, and I really like Nucleus as well. Okay. And when is your projected date of Nucleus coming out?
Well, the publisher has it now. If I had to put a timestamp on it, Mark, I would say probably in about 6 weeks, 6 to 7 weeks. Let's say that.
Okay, towards the end of summer.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. Okay. And okay, let's have a question for Michael. Okay. In your initiation, on page 28 and elsewhere, you cover sudden changes of interests that experiencers go through, and we spoke about that when we did the Black Project show a few months ago. So, are more people discussing such topics with you?
Yeah. Hey, Mark. And hey, Barb. Thanks for having me on. And it's good to be with you and Wally as well. Yeah. I'm finding now that it's not as taboo. I mean, it's still a taboo topic, but people are a little more open now because of what's been going on with the government and Congress and these hearings. And so the snicker factor has gone down just a bit. And so people are a little more making themselves a little more available, if they're trusted or they feel comfortable. But those continue to be one of the indicators, not, all of the indicators of this kind of transformation, for lack of a better word, for people who have been open to this, who try to see that, wait a minute, what's going on here? What has changed? And one of those is this transformation of lifestyle. People who were chasing money, maybe they were in business, maybe they were on Wall Street, and they have this encounter. And all of a sudden, their whole energy shifts to service. And again, it doesn't have to be a contact. It could be an NDE. It could be a death of a loved one. It could be a divorce, a breakup, a life-threatening illness. It could even be just, it doesn't always have to be something like that. It could be, I was reading about a therapist who was talking about they were jogging in San Francisco right at sunrise. And they were just jogging along a beach, and they were like, "Wow, this euphoria came over them." That the words they used were, "I felt one with everything." There was a transcendence. So it doesn't have to be this particularly, but it's something that once you experience it, you don't go back. You don't go back.
Well, I think in alien scriptures, initiation, New World, if you can take it, you are pretty, have been pretty adamant, about once you go through the door, you can't go back through it, and in initiation, just give a lot of the patterns. All of a sudden, you put aside reading, just Mad Magazine, and you start, going into, reading all these ancient sacred texts. Well, that's a pretty big jump, and a lot of the histories, biographies that we've covered on Nightlight reflect those sudden changes too. And Wally, you fall into the same pattern as so many other experiencers. Can you give us a little recap of your experience, and we can get into some of the changes from traditional church upbringing to where you are today?
Well, I guess I can condense that from an hour to 15 minutes. I tell you, I was already 61 years old and pretty set in my ways. I was teaching Sunday school at I guess you would say a conservative church, when I saw my craft, and it did end up changing everything for me. If I would have seen it maybe 30 years ago, it probably would have, caused a detour in my spiritual path. But seeing it so late in life, it basically made me go back and just take a whole new road altogether. Of course, the end game's the same. I'm totally spiritual now, so religion's not even, in my repertoire. Caused me to reevaluate, I think is the right word to say, basically everything that I had been taught. And in doing all this study for myself, I've come to the conclusion that a lot of what I had been taught was, let's just say, shades of the truth, if not totally incorrect. It caused me to focus on the Bible. I mean, that has been my foundation my whole life. So that's generally where I start my conversations from. And now the Bible is basically a nicely written history book with some scattered prophecy in it. That's pretty much what I get out of it. In the past, I had gotten a lot out of it, but I found out that, for me, now, the Bible is basically another book. The Old Testament God, mentioned primarily in Genesis and Exodus, but, all through the Old Testament. But that is no longer my God. My God does not walk. My God did not come here in a craft. My God is not jealous. My God is not responsible for the, shall we say, killings of millions of people, and that number goes up exponentially if you include the flood. It's just, my God doesn't change his mind. And I say his, my God is neither he or she. So everything has changed for me on the path that Brother Michael told me that I was on, and that has turned out to be exactly 100% correct. So all I would say is that it's been refreshing, enlightening, and it's almost like 100 pounds has been lifted off my shoulders. The clarity of mind has increased, and if anything, I've learned to go inside of myself, which is something the church falls flat on. They may deem it as New Ageism or, something to that effect. But learning who I am, learning my ego, how to control my ego, which is still out of control, by the way, but I am cognizant of it now. And realizing that the God in the Bible is totally focused just on the Fertile Crescent area or the Levant. Nothing is mentioned about the rest of the world. And we have had great teachers come, just like Yahweh came, just like Yeshua came, to teach us different cultures all around the world, all these different countries. And the amazing thing is that, and I put a lot of this in my book Nucleus, which, as we just mentioned, the publisher has it now. The overlappings of some of these teachings are remarkable. The overlapping between Krishna and Jesus is remarkable. And you don't get this stuff, in the basic, Christian church. So my view of God is much, much more expansive now. My God is not a person, and I'll fall into the New Testament category that my God now is totally light, love, and spirit. And I think I've said pretty much enough to answer your question. It's been an eye-awakening. That's what I'll say.
Okay, and okay, Michael, to segue from Wally's experience at the age of 61, your experiences started happening at a much younger age. When they're happening, just throw out childhood. You may not really have a lot established, within your mind, like Wally did, at 61. What are some of the differences in experiences happening at such diverse ages?
Well, I mean, I think that when you're younger, you may not have the vocabulary to articulate what was happening. Mm-hmm. When I was younger, looking back, it was one of the reasons I love Kierkegaard. He says life is lived forward, but it's only understood backwards. And when I look back, I probably did have experiences, but I had no vocabulary for it. And by that, I mean, when I was at home and I would see these orbs in my room, and I was just around 6, 7 years old, and I thought everybody saw them, and they were in different colors, and they would just float around. I could see the depth perception in my room of space, and of course, I had the nosebleeds and that kind of thing, and didn't know where that was coming from. Still don't know to this day. Were they implants? Maybe, but I thought my nose was just. I thought my ears were bleeding. I'd wake up with blood on my pillow. And then, I'm 6 or 7. I'm born in 57. You do the math. I don't have the vocabulary for that, which reminds me of the Bible and other sacred texts. Our ancestors didn't have the vocabulary to describe what they were seeing. Here in the 21st century, we would say, okay, hey, that sounds like a crab, or that sounds like this, that, or the other. And then in '89, when I had my first contact experience, you know, it blew me out of the water and it shattered my reality. But, you know, I could describe it. And I was older, and as they happened, I was an older person, and I could voice it. I had other people in a support group who could affirm and confirm that I wasn't crazy. Bud Hopkins, you know, regressed me, Gene Mundy. So I had a little more resources. But I think the younger you are, because people aren't talking about it, it's taboo, it's hard to fathom, and you have nowhere to go with it. I think that's that was the game changer for me. The lifesaver for me was having a support group, being able to being in therapy. That helped me tremendously.
Okay. Interesting insight. So, you know, Michael, you're I would say mentor to all three of us on this call. In initiation, you get into the role of the mentor. What is the role of the mentor? How is one to be effective in that role? You know, what are some characteristics?
That's a great question, Mark. For me, I was modeling what was done for me as a minister, and Wally can attest to this, you know, and myself being in therapy and being on the other side of that, being able to listen without judgment, at least as much as you can. It was so healing for me to have a safe space. And I think that's what the mentor, the priest, the clergy person, the clergyman or woman, you know, and this has nothing to do really with experiencers. It obviously, definitely helps, but you create a safe space. And by that, you do by listening. Not trying to fix, not trying to compare. Being a non-anxious presence was the phrase that I learned when I was a chaplain, because it's just healing to be able to be you, to be able to express. We've all had the experience, I'm sure, where someone comes to you with an issue, a problem, a conundrum, and you know, you don't say anything, you just listen. And at the end of it, at the end of their sharing, they go, "Hey, boy, I feel so much better now. Thanks for talking to me about this." And you may have said 3 words, but they had the chance to talk and not be judged and to be listened to. I think we underestimate listening in our culture. And so that was what was great for me. And I think that's the gift that keeps on giving, to be patient and to listen, not try to make a point, not try to make them see what you see. There'll be time for that. But just to be able to listen and let someone tell their story, I think that in and of itself is a way of healing.
Okay. And you know, it's actually in both of your new books. You discuss why the Unitarian Universalist denomination appeals to you, and I think one of your comments that really stood out for me was one of the founding principle, whatever the right term is that it appeals to the congregation's like childlike sense of wonder. I always like that. I could see why Samuel Taylor Coleridge would have an affinity for the church as well. So, but Michael, could you delve into that a little bit, please?
The Unitarian Universalist Church is a very progressive and liberal church in its theology because it allows us to draw, like for instance, on Sundays I could preach from something I read in the New York Times, or I could speak on something I read in the Judeo-Christian scriptures. I could, I have resources. Life is my resource. It could be from the Upanishads. I have a broad range to choose from. But because it's a non-doctrinal faith, I don't have a rigid set of rules. And we live in mystery. We respect that, ideally. And so we don't have all the answers. And like a child, and of course, Yeshua talks about the kingdom of heaven being like a child in some ways, but you're just enamored with life, with just being alive and the mystery of that. We see that in Aboriginal cultures, Native American cultures, the Lakota call the Great Spirit Wakatonkan, the Great Mystery. And so there's that childlike, not childish, but this childlike way of looking at life, just of nature, appreciating that, of just the beauty that's around us, without getting into dogmas and is this, you're worshiping nature, or you're not worshiping this book or whatever. It's just the joy of being alive. And of course, we can choose those other things. Nothing wrong with that. But we are comfortable with mystery. We don't have to be certain or know everything. And there's a freedom in that. But in that freedom, it's also threatening to other people because you're not playing by the rules.
Okay. And Wally, you made a comment, kind of similar to what Michael just said about not playing by the rules.
Well, I'll tell you right now that I would be a Unitarian, Universalist, if I had one near me. I have studied, their belief system, and out of all the denominations out there, they're the closest in line with now what I now believe. So it's they are open, and I'm sure Michael will agree with this. They are open to other cultures and other traditions from around the world, in addition to what Yeshua taught. And what resonates with me is that truth is truth, and these people who came from the skies, they did not come here to destroy us. They came here to teach us and to share their knowledge with us. And it just did not happen in Nazareth and Bethlehem. This has happened around the world. So I'm trying now to be inclusive of all of these teachings, and many of them overlap. And that's where I give kudos to the Universal Unitarian Church, is that they incorporate this as well.
Okay, that makes sense. And there's some. I think there's some overlap in. All of your books, and you two didn't know each other until after several. Each of you had a couple books under your belts, but Michael, with your Enlightenment book and initiation, there's not that they're not companion pieces, but there is some overlapping themes. When you're looking at characteristics like pre and post experiences in initiation and acceptance of all, anyone who's coming into the congregation, is discussed in Enlightenment. Is that showing some kind of similar theme between the books, or a philosophy that stemmed from your experiences into being a minister?
I think, and I feel that there is a theme between the two. Initiation is a handbook for experiences and for people who love them. I should have put that on the cover. And out of this experience, there was a radical acceptance of life, of difference, of developing our interior lives, which is what I call spirituality. In Enlightenment, there's that same sentiment. On the cover, it says, enlightenment is when a wave realizes it's part of the ocean, and that's the quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. And so in both of these books, initiation is getting us to see that we are not separate from each other, that we are connected to even beings who are off planet. Enlightenment is saying that we are all connected to everything as well. But it's not a UFO-themed book, but it's both of them attack the false notion of separation. And that separation is an illusion because we all come from the same source. And so that was one of the reasons I became a minister, to not only embody that, but also when I was being contacted and I saw how people were pigeonholing, for instance, the Greys or the reptilians. And I said, we do that with people of color. We just judge them by one action or actions of a group. All reptilians are not out to get you and evil. All Greys are not out to get you and evil. All people of color are not criminals or terrorists or what have you. And so I couldn't just sit by. And I refer to it in alien scriptures as a sort of galactic kind of racism. And if we're going to move ahead as a species, if we're going to go ahead into this age of Aquarius, which we are now in, we're going to have to learn to be comfortable with diversity, not just diversity aesthetically, because diversity is more than just skin color, but people who think differently are part of diversity. Diversity in religion, diversity in ideas. This is all part of how we go forward. And as far as I know, in my research and in my experiences, star people don't look at race that way. They're just different races. And that's what I was trying and am trying to do with my life. And with with what I write about. So that's a great question. There is a theme, even though they're about two very different experiences.
Yeah, maybe there's a same theme between two unrelated books, because that is who you are. And, like, for example, in Initiation on page 33, you talk about, experiencers share these traits, help to make the world a better place, wanting to serve humanity.
Yes, those indicators, yes.
Right. And, and I think, your previous, and Wally's comments about why the UU Church has a growing appeal.
I think the UU Church, for me, has a growing appeal. Wally's absolutely correct, and he is a UU. He just has to find a place to share those ideas. Like I was a UU and didn't know it. But we also transcend UU, because a lot of UUs, not all, would have a problem with what we're talking about tonight. And no denomination is perfect. But even without the populated universe component, even without being an experiencer, what these spiritual avatars and teachers are trying to say is what we're saying now, that we come from the same source, we'll go back to that source, that the petty differences that we perceive, whether it's your skin color or who you sleep with or how you self-identify, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, these are illusions. And if we're not careful, we will destroy ourselves because of these illusions. And this is true whether you believe in UFOs or not, whether you believe in star people or not. This is what you and Barbara, and I don't think I'm putting words in your mouth. We may differ on how to get there. We may even differ politically, but this is where we want to go. Mm-hmm. And so that has been my mission, to serve and to make those connections and to help people connect those dots. Even without the UFO reality. The UFO reality for me has expedited that. And like we were, and like Wally was saying, it's a game changer. And once you accept that we live in a populated universe, once you say yes to that, whether you've seen a craft, whether you've seen beings, but once you open yourself to, you know what, it's too big. Like in Contact, Jodie Foster's character says, if we're the only people here talking about Earthlings, it seems like an awful waste of space. Once you get that, your beliefs have to change. Your beliefs about God, your beliefs about what it means to be human, your belief about how the world works It has to change. But we know that no one likes change except a wet baby. And if you are invested in a way of life, you're seeing that change now. You're seeing that change. We're seeing it change. We're seeing that we're talking about off-world intelligences. We're living in a country that's getting browner every year. We're talking about what control women can have of their bodies. We're talking about the economic and financial repercussions of living in a capitalistic system. All of those things are changing right now. And if you're wedded to an older way, you're watching change happen. And the way you thought the world worked, you're finding out that it doesn't. That's scary for people. And so how do we navigate that change and that fear? That's what I want to help to be, a midwife, if you will. Because we're going into a new world, whether we want to or not. With AI, we are going into a new world where the people who rule now, it's just going to change. It's not anything new. All civilization, all empires go through this. But if you're not a student of history, if you don't have people shepherding you, if you have people trying to take advantage of your fears, this is a really scary time.
And hopefully, you just brought some calm to the listeners. Maybe somewhat at the other end of the spectrum, about what makes us uneasy is in Wally's Nucleus. He writes about Deuteronomy chapter 32, verses 8 through 9. The passage is about when the Most High gave the nations their inheritance. When he divided the sons of men, he fixed their bounds according to the number of the sons of God. But Yahweh's portion was his people, Jacob his share of inheritance. Wally, what drew your attention to that passage? And then I have hopefully a relevant follow-up question for Michael.
Well, thank you for allowing me the chance to expound on that. When I was doing my, internal research on just who God was, because I had to back up all the way to square one and start over, that passage just really resonated with me to the extent that it changed my outlook on God completely. That being in the Bible, actually my translation says Elyon, who's actually the Most High God, gave an inheritance to his children. And you can go to the Ugaritic text, which were found in Syria, and realize that this Elyon, or just El for short, had 70 children. And he divided up their inheritance 70 ways. And Yahweh got 1/70th of the inheritance. So I just started focusing on that and realized that, well, who would I want to be my God? The Most High God, which is El, or one of the 70 sons of El, as in Yahweh? I would want the Most High God. So that right there just throws a wrench in my previous church teachings. Most people would say that Yeshua's father is Yahweh, and Yahweh is the God of the Bible, which ended up becoming the God of the universe or universes. And the actual Bible itself, does not tell me that. It tells me that El was the actual father, and he's the one that issued the inheritance, and Yahweh just got a small portion. And then you realize that his siblings, Mott and Baal and a bunch of others, are his equivalents. And now that made me realize that, well, no wonder Baal was venerated so much. Perhaps his property was close to where Yahweh had his property. And then I started realizing that Baalbek, the city of Baalbek, huge, the largest cut stones in the world, as I understand it, is right there north of Israel in Lebanon. So I just started connecting all these dots and focusing on the creator of evil, which is mentioned in Isaiah, which refers to, again, Yahweh, and then realizing that Yahweh flew, and all these other attributes that I had previously mentioned, that for me now, he's no God at all. I mean, he came here and was here and received property, but he had powers, as all of them did, that were misunderstood. And I guess it's like what happened in World War II that I put in within grasp, but how easy it is to make a god. You have miraculous powers, and people don't understand, and all of a sudden you are a god. And that's the way I interpret what happened now. And even in Numbers it says God is not man, but yet Yahweh walked, and in my view now, it was definitely humanoid. People saw him. Even the Bible says that nobody can see God and live. Hundreds, if you include some of the Psalms, the sons of God there, hundreds of people saw this God. So that just changed everything. I mean, God for me now did not write the Bible. I'll just go ahead and say that. Definitely written by men, and it has been changed multiple times by men. It's even being changed as we, speak to each other this evening. It's as I say, a nice book for history and a nice book for some prophecy, and it does pertain to Yeshua, and Yeshua did come here, and I find that his words are indeed true, and it's almost like in my world now that he came to correct what the God of the Old Testament put in place, because everything Yeshua says is almost 180 degrees different than what had been taught before. So this is how I've connected the dots now, and in doing so, my God is truly a universal God over all of these races in the universe, or universes and dimensions, a source of light and love. And Michael's correct. We're all connected, and we're all connected by this love. And it's exists in such quantities we can't fathom it. And I'm fully convinced of that now. And so that just makes the Bible relegated to another book on the shelf for me. When I pray, I'm praying to a universal God, and I'm focusing on my inner self now. I really believe that that's one of the things that Jesus was trying to teach, was it's the kingdom of heaven is actually within you. you achieve it from within. And in mainstream Christian churches, at least the ones I have been affiliated with, that's an area that's not touched. They teach you on what to do and how to say things and what to say to your brothers and sisters, and some history on what this means, following the typical agenda that's, as Michael would agree with, that's been in place for 1,800 years.
Yeah.
And that's where it stops. I mean, they tell you all about heaven, but not how to get there. And for me now, heaven resides within, and it's up to me to get there. And I've been alive many, many times, and I'll be alive again. I'm never going to die. My spirit lives eternally, and that's something else they don't touch. And I put a lot of this in Nucleus. So I'm hoping the audience is hearing me out. So I'm hoping it's an interesting read for a lot of people.
It is.
It's about as far as I can go, and once I realized who my God is, that's the end point. So I guess that's why I called it the Nucleus.
Okay.
It's all within and the end point.
Okay. So Wally, in that passage, talking about two different gods. There's in line verse 8. There's the number of sons of God. My college edition of the Jerusalem Bible has a reference to that the number of the sons of God are the guardian angels of the nations. So, and what I thought was interesting about your commentary was, when Michael does his video shows and he can show his figurines, of the different types of space brothers that he's met, are the different species almost very similar to this number of the sons of God, or guardian angels of the nations? Or is that, am I off base on that? Am I partially correct? What, Michael, do you have some kind of insight into where the different species are coming from?
No, I have no idea, Mark. I have no idea. But what we do know, or what we can know, and if we riff on 32:8, and remember that this is all about the translations. The translations of the Bible, and you have a very good Bible there. The translations are what is key here, and the Bibles that are sold to the average person are different from the Bibles that scholars and seminary students read. And that's by design. And so when Wally talks about, I'm looking at the New Revised Standard Version, when the Most High, in Wally's Bible it's El, and sometimes it's El Shaddai, sometimes it's El Elron. I look at that as this probably a commander of a ship. Yahweh is not even a senior commander. And so when he gets this land, and he doesn't get all of the tribe of Jacob, but he gets the Jacobs. When you get the land, you get the When you get the land, you get the people on the land. And that's why Yahweh and others had to go to war with so many people. Obviously, Yahweh is a warlike entity, but he didn't get any land. He's just got that little sliver there. And so he's going into Canaan. He's going to other places. There are different species, obviously. When we look at the Vedas, the Upanishads, and they talk about Vishnu and Krishna, and they're portrayed as blue, that's a different race. When we hear the Cherokee and the Hopi talk about their Palladian ancestry, that's a different race. When we look at the Greys, and there's several species of Greys, what we're talking about here is an invasion. That's what we would call it today. Now, Wally and I are on the same page on a lot of things. I haven't thrown it away yet. I have, and I don't know if Wally's saying he's throwing it away. I don't look at it as just a book that I put on my shelf. I look at it, especially the First Testament, but I look at it now as a book of our ancestors trying to tell us what it was like sharing the planet with these beings. Because that's what we were doing. When you go back, because Genesis obviously is based on the Mesopotamian Sumerian text, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Enu Elish, who makes no doubt about it. They're not ashamed. They're telling you that there are beings from outer space that came here. The early Jewish writers tried to whitewash that out to make this about monotheism. And Wally's correct. And other people who agree with us, they're correct. But once you look at the Bible this way, you can't go back to the old way. Now, that's not saying, for instance, you can't be a Christian and still wrestle with this, because our early church fathers wrestled with this as well. But back to you with your question, the clues we get are 3 planets mentioned in the scriptures: Orion, the Pleiades, and Sirius. Those are and those are hints to where these beings may have came from, because you have to ask, why is Job mentioning this? Well, Yahweh or the Lord, which could be a different person altogether. It may not even be Yahweh at this point. It could be another commander of a ship, or another high-ranking Elohim. However, we do know that what we would call that today is an invasion. And these beings are still here. And maybe that's one of the reasons why our government is just spoon-feeding us this, because what do you say? That we have been invaded, and we have been invaded since ancient times. Plato talks about it. He was talking about it, a millennium before Jesus, that we were invaded, and that these beings have a hand in creating us. And to our ancestors, they had godlike technology. But there's more than one race that has visited us and has continued to visit us since the catastrophes. If you go back and read Timaeus and Critias, which I've been doing of late because Plato was so far ahead of his time. Plato believed in God, he believed in reincarnation, and he believed in the gods. What he was talking about centuries before Jesus is what quantum physics is telling us now. He believed in a fractalized universe. But our ancestors, our early church fathers, Clement of Alexandria, Origen, Justin Martyr, Marcion, to name a few, they were Christian leaders and they believed in ETs. And they talked about that. What do we do with the First Testament? Because if we believe in Yahweh as a God, then he was a monster. And how can we believe in that? And so when we go back to the 6th and 7th century of BCE, when Hezekiah and Josiah, Hezekiah being the grandfather, decided to destroy all the altars to Asherah and Baal and Kohash and all of these other gods who Yahweh was jealous of. And then his grandson Josiah comes along and starts to rewrite the scriptures to make this not about God really, but about being Yahwist. They were Yahwist. And so there's one God, Yahweh. There's one high priest. There's one temple in Jerusalem. We get to decide what's fake news. We get to decide who you're supposed to follow. This has been going on since the beginning of time. That's where we get it from. Rome did it. Greece did it. There's one God. There's one high priest. There's one king. There's one temple. It was just easier to rule that way. It was easier to have all the taxes and all the shekels come into Jerusalem because that's the main temple. Doesn't it sound familiar? We do that today. We do that today. And it's coming from our ancestors. That's why I still find the Bible to be very pertinent. There are wonderful stories in there. There are wonderful lessons in there, but they're telling us this is how we dealt with off-world intelligences. And you got to be careful about your foreign policy, because when Yahweh left after Samuel, and when the people decided, they fired Yahweh. They said, we want a human king. We want Saul. Now, if Yahweh is omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, why would you choose that? Why would you choose a mortal over that? But our ancestors were saying, you can make the changes. They got rid of Yahweh. Now, Yahweh was, of course, meddling in their foreign policy. But there's another cue there when you go to 1 Samuel. That this individual is not that. He's a part of the Elohim. But we were invaded. And all cultures talk about it, whether it's Viking, whether it's the Mayans and the Popol Vuh. We see it in Genesis 11 with the Tower of Babel. We see it in Genesis 6. We see it in the Upanishads. We see it in the Mahabharata. They didn't have the words to describe it. You see it in Sitchin's trilogy, specifically in the Wars of Gods and Men. But we were invaded. And when these beings, they were fighting among themselves. We see it in Greece. They were fighting among themselves, and we were caught in the crossfire. And the First Testament, specifically, it's a little different when Jesus comes along, but by then there's still off-world intelligences here. You see it in Ephesians 6. Mm-hmm. But we were invaded, and we have been invaded. And the lessons we need to learn there is by picking up that Bible, by picking up these other narratives, because the same way they ruled then, they're ruling now. And we answer to those people. Our governments do, the governments that are in contact. So I know what Wally's talking about, because I went through that, but I had to go back and say this is still a lot of value here, because our ancestors are telling us this is what it was like to share the planet with these beings.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, thank you. That's what they're telling us. Jesus comes along with a little different, but he's aware. My God, he's one of them, one of the many, because there were so many races here and that are here. Some of them are neutral. You look in Genesis 11, we see the Tower of Babel. Okay, the Elohim, because when you put the Lord there, you can put Elohim there. And you can get the New Jerusalem Bible. You can get a better translation. But the Lord, just put Elohim there. And what do they see? They see that human beings have advanced. You know, the Tower of Babel wasn't just a high-rise building that was violating building codes. It was probably, like Zechariah Sitchin says, there was a Shem, which he called a rocket ship. Anyway, whatever you want to call it, we had the technology that we threatened them. And the Elohim looked down, and what did they say? If we don't stop them now, there'll be nothing we can stop them for. They will do anything they want to do. And so they came down and mixed up the languages, and they destroyed that. That's in Genesis 6. When you go that's in Genesis 11. When you go to 6, you talk about the Elohim, that's this council. Some Christians say, oh, well, Michael, that's not it. Yeah, it's plural, but it means it's the Holy Spirit. Well, there was no concept of the Holy Spirit until the 4th century. At the Council of Nicaea, that's the Trinity. I'm sorry, not the Holy Spirit. There was no concept of the Trinity then. And the Jewish people do not believe in a Trinity. So that's not what they're writing about. And all you have to do is read Genesis and read the Mesopotamian text, and you can see that Genesis is a recreation of what they were talking about in Babylon and Mesopotamia. The only difference is, in the 6th and 7th century, Josiah and Hezekiah, they rewrote it because they wanted to be a monotheistic religion. Primitive Judaism was never monotheistic. The Mesopotamians had no problems. They weren't trying to cover that up. They were beings who came down from space. They called them the Anunnaki. We call them the Elohim or the Nephilim. But however you look at it, it's called an invasion. This planet was invaded.
So, if I may interject, how many races,
Sure.
how many species, I guess is the right word to say, do you feel that has visited us? I'm hearing
I have no idea.
It will eclipse
I have
100
no idea.
different species.
That could be the least. I forgot the guy who talked about that. He worked for the government. He was a soldier. It'll come to me probably after the podcast is over. But he said at that time there were 33 different. But we have been visited. And we always are. When you go back and read Plato, Critias and Timaeus, he says every 5,000 years, and he learned this from Solon, who was a Babylonian priest, who learned it from an Egyptian priest, who learned it from an Atlantean priest, that every 5,000 years there is a cataclysm. We could be looking at that time now. And every 5,000 years or so, there's a cataclysm, and human beings start again from ground zero. Sometimes we're upgraded. Okay, when you look at Genesis and you look what's happening there, that seems, the first chapter of Genesis, that seems like that's after a cataclysm. There's water. The earth is null and void. What's key to that is that the earth is already here. It's not created. It's already here. So what do they start doing? They start terraforming. They separate the dry land from the salt water. They separate the fresh water from the salt water. That sounds like a cataclysm has happened. So what I'm trying to say is there have been other floods before Noah, and there'll be other afterwards, and that these beings are terraforming the land. They're starting over. And then they make human beings, as Sitchin talks about in the Mesopotamian text, to be slaves. They want to keep us so ignorant that we don't even know we're naked in the laboratory that's called the Garden of Eden. But then when you read closely, and this is what I wasn't able to do, which is why I don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, is that, I was focused on the positive extraterrestrials because that's what I thought happened to me, and that's what I felt, and that's true. But when you go back and look at these texts, there's some beings who want to keep us ignorant, and they want to keep us without knowledge. And there's some beings who come to help us. There were some beings like Asherah. She's the female cohort of Yahweh. She taught people how to make beer. She taught what planets what plants were good and what plants were poisonous. She talked about sanitation, how to create city living. You have the beings who, when in Acts, I'm jumping thousands of years, when they help Peter get out of prison. Mm-hmm. When one of them comes to comfort Paul on his way to Rome to see Caesar. They help Daniel when he's in the lion's den. So you got some beings who want to see what Project Earth is like, who want to see where this experiment is going to go, and you have some like Yahweh and others who say, you're just here for my pleasure. Your plan is we just need your resources. I wouldn't let that part in, but it's right there. It's not all kumbaya like maybe Brother Greer would have us believe. There's some beings who don't mean us any harm, just like there are people who don't mean us any harm. And there's some beings who just want to use us for the resources and use the planet. And this has always been. This has always been. You just have to go back and you just have to look at that.
Well, I'm glad I have not totally pitched my 11 different Bibles. They command a whole shelf in my bookcase. So okay. I will give credence to what he says.
No, I that was just for my own research, but I found, in listening, just like you do, brother, we research, we listen. If you want to get a good book, you get an interlinear Bible, or you get the New Jerusalem Bible, because those translations, when you look at the footnotes, they're more transparent. But the Bibles that are sold to the general public are very different that they sell to biblical scholars or people in seminary. And so the King James Version is the worst version you can get. Yes, the prose is beautiful, but Jesus did not speak Shakespearean English. That's the worst translation you can get. So if you can get an Aramaic translation, but I would say it costs a little more, but you get an interlinear Bible, or you get the New Jerusalem Bible, and they will go into where this should be Elohim there. This is not the Lord. This is a translation. We're 32:8, the Most High. It's El Elyon, it's El Shaddai. But when you look at that, as Wally was saying, they're just talking about a higher ranking individual. It could be a commander of a ship. When you get to Ezekiel, he sees the Lord sitting on the throne. We know that's not the Lord. What would God need with a starship? But it could be a higher ranking military person. And he's talking to Ezekiel about politics and religion. And Ezekiel's trying to tell us, the hand of the Lord is upon me, and I felt heavy, which is a lovely way of saying the G-forces are pressing me into this seat. But they didn't have the vocabulary, but we have it now. And when you read it through that lens, you can say, and you can see the writer struggling back then to try to say what this is. That's a wonderful description. The hand of the Lord was heavy upon me. But he was saying, I can't move because of the G-forces. We have words for that now. We have words for flying chariots. We have words for Josephus talking about the siege of Jerusalem in Book 4, and he's talking about flying shields. We have words for that now. That's a UFO. That's a UAP. They didn't have the words then.
Okay. Michael, you were just talking about some of Plato's works.
Yeah.
And got in some other historical examples, like the angel breaking St. Peter out of the Roman prison.
And saving Daniel.
When Wally was on Joey Medea's show recently. He was explaining that there was actually words for the 4 beams coming from under the bottom of the like 1710 Dutch painting, and I think Barbara has that on the.
I have it. It's de Gelder, the baptism of Christ. It looks like there's a ship. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wally, could you explain a little bit about? Okay, we're moving from 2,000 years ago up to the 18th century. So we're starting to see some of these terms being applied to early depictions of.
Okay. Yes. all those paintings and petroglyphs, geoglyphs. They've been around, I guess, for 14,000 years that we know of. I have quite a few of those in crossing the crevice near the back. And if I'm understanding your question correctly, you want me to put today's terminology into that?
What was the artist depicting?
They were depicting what they saw. You could not have made that stuff up back then. And it's the same crafts, and I'm using that word liberally, UFOs, UAPs, that have been showing up in these pictures and paintings for over 2,000 years. It just plays into what Michael has said. We're not alone, and we've never been alone. There's so much to see. Sometimes without a doubt, people are flying in little ships. There's no way you could have. I don't think you could have thought of that, 2,000 years ago, unless you had seen it. Why would you take the time to draw that or to make that into a side of a rock face, unless it was totally like it was for me, life-changing, and you wanted people to know what you saw. Some of these pictures there's beams coming from the crafts. I now interpret that as glories, and glory is a hard word to define. It's like a bedazzling light, but it's a glory that actually shone around the shepherds on the night that Yeshua was born. It's a beam of light, just like a flashlight shooting down from heaven, and you see that in some of these pictures. And we can handle that today. We can think of it as a laser, or a very bright LED light with focused edges. If you're up in the sky and point it down to earth, it's going to make a perfect circle, and that's exactly what happened with the shepherds that night. It's probably what happened with Paul on the Damascus road as well. But you see that in one craft, 4 beams shooting down, and those are glories. And it's actually mentioned, I believe, in the Christmas song "Silent Light," Mark. That I believe it's in the second verse. Glories stream afar. That's what that relates to me. Those are glories streaming from the craft, from up in the sky, or what we would call from heaven. Glories streaming from heaven down to earth.
Okay, yeah, and Michael must have had the photo or the painting pulled up. I just had it on my note, but to work that in at some point. But yeah, Michael was right about The title, it is The Baptism of Jesus by
Kurt the Gelder.
Yes, from 1710, and it is seems like it's at a Cambridge, England museum. I don't know exactly which one in Cambridge, but it's a really captivating painting. It's just like just the example, from alien scriptures. It really, pulled me into what Michael was devoted so much time to writing about. Is the pillar of fire at night, kind of hovering ahead of Moses and his followers. Other than birds, what was flying at 2000 BC? How do you explain that? And when you get to Van Gelder's painting, the Gelder's painting, how do you explain what the artist is depicting other than a UFO? It's not a bird. It's just very obviously something that is flying, and then you get the glories coming down. How do you explain that from 300 years ago? What are these artists seeing?
Well, it's very possible they have seen what I saw was the craft in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
You can't make this stuff up, and it's as valid today as it was 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, I think also too that there's that cognitive dissonance, that if you're not ready for it, you're just going to deny it. There's stories of people, of Native Americans, when they saw the European ships coming. Some of them didn't see them because they didn't have room in their pantheon, in their vision for what they saw. Now, of course, we know they did see them, and we know what happened. But it's almost like a cognitive dissonance, because if it did happen, you can't go back. You can't go back. And even today, there's more evidence that UFOs exist than there are that Jesus existed. But we're just not ready to see that. And so if you're not ready, you won't. You won't. And you can talk to someone until they're blue in the face.
If the mind's not open, you're not going to receive any information.
Okay. Michael, with pretty heavy topics, like we were just discussing, what's the latest with ancient aliens? You did a shoot recently in Sedona.
Yeah.
Is that what's?
No, that's a different show.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. No, I did 2 new episodes of Ancient Aliens that haven't aired yet. One is called The Chosen, unless they change it, and one is called The Teachers. And on June 19th, now I don't know if I'm on the first episode, but you're right. Yeah, I flew out to Roswell. It was wonderful. I'd never been there. I went to the museum, didn't see the crash site, didn't have time. But it's a new show. It's called Alien Encounters, Fact or Fiction. It's airing June 19th at 10 o'clock on on Discovery, on the Discovery Channel. what's significant about that is from now on, you're going to see more and more documentaries and films about this. I think Spielberg's supposed to be making another film, but this is not going to be, where the snicker factor anymore. It's taken seriously. I don't know if you saw that Schumer and Biden and some other folks are trying to get an advisory board together to talk more about this. Obviously, Mark Rubio is involved, and Tim Burkett from I think Tennessee. But yeah, this is very, very serious now, and you're going to see more films about this. You're going to see more documentaries about this topic. The government is going great guns into this, investing money, that kind of thing. Of course, you've got Gary Nolan and Jacques Vallée and other folks talking about working on exotic materials. So this is the world we're going into now. This is the world we're going into now. And when, there is that tech part that the government is really into, and I get it, but religion is going to have to get into the conversation as well, because there's going to be a lot of questions, especially Christianity. And you want to be ready to be able to explain. People are going to want answers. And people like Wally, people like myself, obviously the Vatican's been doing this since 2009, being more public about it. It's because it's the spiritual aspect, which sometimes is different from religion, sometimes it's not. But that's what people are going to be wanting answers for. The tech part, well, they're trying to take care of that, corporations and the government and that kind of thing, selling exotic material. We see it in our cars now. We see a lot of this as extraterrestrial technology. It's so obvious. But it's going to be that religious piece that people are going to want some answers for.
Well, I think Barry Downing has said it's going to cause a meta reformation. Excuse me, for theology and religion. I mean, it's going to have to really change.
I'm looking forward to seeing that episode on June 19th.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm in that one because it's a series and I just did an episode. But if the trailer's already out, if I have it, I can send it to you. I think I still have it. But it's a new show. A friend of mine has just done another show that's coming out. So this is going to be the new norm.
So how many years has Ancient Aliens been on TV now?
I don't know how many years, but I know they've got well over 20 episodes.
Well, I would say that it has to be somewhere around, about 20 seasons.
Yes, that's what I mean, 20 seasons, yeah. Mm-hmm. 20 seasons, yeah, not 20 episodes, way more than 20 episodes. Yeah. And they, there's a lot of criticism about it, and some of it is warranted, but they made this a topic, they helped make this a topic where people don't laugh at you anymore.
I think over all the seasons, along with Patrick's commentary, I think many excellent points have been made.
Yes.
All the sudden, I think that's also another entirely different show. But there's like Ugg the caveman, all of a sudden is building the pyramids. So what caused such a radical transformation of engineering habitation sites or where you bury someone? I think that show really pioneered things like that. But get back into more of the fascinating literature that the two of you have put out there in for a little sneak peek of Nucleus. Wally, you draw our attention to where God's home is located, and we can find that in Deuteronomy, the start of Deuteronomy 33. So he lived. We know he lived in the desert in Seir.
Well,
what is your research?
You're referring to Yahweh. There's several different mentions that he comes from Sinai and or Seir, the mountains of Seir, which is really in northern Saudi Arabia, and the prophet Deborah makes mention of that for one. But that seems to be where he, or his, I guess I don't want to say home, but where he resided, for lack of a better word, was either on Sinai or in the area of Seir, the mountains of Seir. So he was definitely a local god.
No, that's what the passage says. Yahweh came from Sinai. For them, after Seir, he rose on the horizon. After Mount Paran, he shone forth. Okay, so okay, home, where he resided, encampment. It's kind of like all those terms.
I could steal some of Michael's thunder. Is probably where he parked his craft. Was on top of Mount Sinai.
Okay, I like that too. But that's one of the nice things about reading all of your books. Starting with Michael, nearly 10 years ago, is you sit there and come across these passages in your books, and it's like, wait, hold on a second, let me check that out. And you go, there is on my page 225. There is exactly what you wrote about. So it's Yahweh's home, parking lot for his craft, whatever you want to call it. But what do you make of that when traditional Sunday school, or Michelangelo's painting has Yahweh floating around on a cloud, touching fingers with a lifeless atom?
Well, there's other verses that say he rides on the clouds. He rides on cherubs, chariots of fire, whatnot. But without a doubt, that God flew and had a craft. Perhaps they all had crafts. Not only the Elohim or El Elyon, but they all had crafts. They came here. As we've already stated, we were here. They came here. So just the fact that they came here for a God who's omni everything, I have an issue with that. Just like the gods came down. You mentioned the Tower of Babel. He had to come down to investigate. He had to come down to investigate Sodom and Gomorrah to see what he was hearing was correct. He had to come down to see it for himself. So this God came down some 15 times, I believe 13 or 15, depending on how your Bible reads, in the Old Testament alone. So how do you go down if you're already supposed to be there? That's a question I ask, and I've never gotten an answer. The answer is you can't. If for an omnipotent, you guys, every word you can think of for God that knows everything, the beginning and end, exists everywhere. You can't go down if you're already there. So that's just one of the ways. You know, when I read the Bible now, it's amazing if you look for things as you read. If you're in a Sunday school or church, you're already given what to look for, and you're reading it because you've already been programmed that what you're going to read supports what has already been said. But if you can erase all that from your mind and grab that book, read it with an open mind, you can connect the dots so easily that these crafts go all the way through the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. And it's so easy to see that the Old Testament God, and I'm speaking for myself now, is something entirely different from what we glean from John and 1 John in the New Testament. You know, in the New Testament, nobody sees God, and God is spirit, light, and love. And in the Old Testament, as I've already mentioned, it's more of a humanoid male walking around, or flying in a craft, or creating, you know, death or diseases. Because people wouldn't listen to him and follow his ways. And this went on and on and on. And, you know, Israel never did fall in line. So that's why I make a statement in Nucleus. It's almost like Yeshua came to correct the ways of Yahweh, because it is night and day different. And Michael had mentioned Marcy, and I believe if I was alive 2,000 years ago, guys, that I would probably be in one of his churches. I'd probably be a Marcionite. I'd probably just focus on the New Testament and some of the selected, you know, writings of Paul and whatnot out of that. But my God for me now, and I'll say this for even the 80 to 100 species that we've talked about, for me, there is the same source for everybody. That source is the light and the love and the spirit. And if you can, to realize that, you've really got to dig deep. And some people can't realize that yet, so they still want to focus on a physical God that looks, you know, or they think that is one of us. But if you can eclipse that and jump ahead, you realize that we're all connected. And when I say all, I mean everybody, everywhere, and everything. Every species. Think about it. They communicate. They move about. Very similar to us. They may not look like us, but they're interact beings. And yes, exactly. They connect to a higher source as well, I'm sure. So I'm just throwing that out, you know, for our audience, that this God in the New Testament for me is totally spirit, conformed in a way that I can't understand. It's beyond my comprehension. It's one of those mysteries.
And Wally, as a follow-up, a little bit ago, Michael was talking about, the different versions that are out there. I get the point about the King James version does sound like a Shakespearean play, but your Wally, your pursuit of the truth has led you to the pure word translation. We also have our buddy Ken, God's Word, also working on translation. How are these new translations getting us closer to the original message?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure we know 100% for sure what the original message was. I'm inclined to agree with Michael. It's really, a history on they're sharing this world with other beings. And I would throw out that part of the problem we have is there's just a limited number of Hebrew words when the Hebrew Bible was written, something like 7,000 to 7,500. And you compare that with what we have today, somewhere north of 150,000. It's really created, I guess, a conundrum in a way with all these different translations, and they're all a little bit different. So you're trying to go back to the source, and unfortunately, we don't have the sources anymore. There may be one extant copy, maybe in the Vatican, but everything else is gone. So it's translation of a translation of a translation of a translation, and a transmission of a transmission of a transcription, and we have what we have, and I use two Bibles now, and the others on the shelf basically just sit there. I use a new Bible that came out called The Keys of the Kingdom. It's the original Hebrew. Elohim is mentioned all the 7,000 times that it was taken out, or 2,500 times, that it was taken out before. Plus, it's got some extra stuff in it. It's in the original order of the Old Hebrew. And then I use the, as you had mentioned, the pure word, which is actually Koine Greek. And it changes the flavor for me pretty substantially. I highly recommend it for people to get a different insight as to what some of these verses mean. For example, the pure word uses the word continuously and by your choice in a lot of important verses. And you don't see that word by your choice or continuously in these modern translations. So I'll just throw that out as a little tidbit of information.
Okay. We're approaching 10 minutes left, and give everyone like 5 minutes to plug everything. But maybe one final question we can get into. I think we have a really interesting short discussion on, and both of you might have can play off of one another's answers, is in Genesis 3 3, verse 22, it's written, then Yahweh God said, see, the man has become like one of us with his knowledge of good and evil. And Wally, you wrote in Nucleus, and people can read about that later this summer, that man can handle upper level consciousness, throughout Michael's books you get that too. But it is, there's a little bit of Gnostic philosophy mixed in there. What do we need to know about consciousness as each of us and the listeners continue to grow, and hopefully the rest of the planet will improve their behaviors as well? But what is that passage meaning, encouraging us to do?
Well, that's a good question. I could go several different ways. For me, it's like Peter, and perhaps like Paul. Look what happened with Peter. He was with Yeshua for 2.5 years, and he, being one of the disciples, received what I term as upper level teaching. We, the masses, the Gentiles, received teaching in parables, or the lower level. But Peter actually took a step out of the boat and walked one step on the water before he panicked. He was able to walk on water for that first step. And I look at Paul, who went to Saudi Arabia for 2 to 3 years for training before he became an apostle. And we don't know who trained him, but he was able to, blind Elymas and bring Eutychus back to life. I mean, he couldn't have done that before. These are just some of the embedded abilities in us. We have the seeds in us. It's just, my take is we've lost our teachers, and we're no longer being taught. And a lot of that is our own fault. We're too concerned with the house we live in, the car we drive, the job we have, getting our children to the soccer game at night, and then putting food on the table and mowing the yard, and there's hardly any time left for us. And that's kind of what I get into in the Nucleus, about going inside, realizing who you are, what our place is here, and that we have these dormant powers in us. If they could just be developed, I guess is the right word to say, or brought out to the open.
Okay. Michael, how about you?
I agree with that. I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at it, like I said, there was a contingent. It says, then the Lord God said, but the translation would say, then the Elohim said. See, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. Now he might reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life. Again, I may not be as eloquent with Wally as this, and I do agree with what he's saying. But there were some Elohim, as Sitchin goes into, and others, that did not want us to evolve, that wanted us to be so ignorant that we didn't know we were naked. And as we have evolved, they had to stop that. They had to keep us, because we were too troublesome. And so the upgrade, and sometimes we were downgraded as well. There's a wonderful story in the Mayan Popol Vuh where there were just so many humans, and we couldn't be controlled. And the gods in the Popol Vuh, what they did was, they said, my God, they're noisy, they're multiplying, they're rebellious, they're getting out of control. And what they did was they sprayed some type of mist on the human beings there, and it dumbed us down. It did something neurologically. Sound familiar? And this is in a Popol Vuh, right? And so, again, it lends itself, obviously Genesis 11, when we get to Tower of Babel, but right here, we are already becoming a nuisance. We are already becoming hard to manage. And you see, they're becoming more like us. They're evolving. We won't be able to control them. Something's got to be done. So we're cast out of the laboratory, which was the Garden of Eden. That's how I see that.
That's a fascinating interpretation. Okay, so as we wrap up the show, Wally, how can people get a hold of your two books and possibly pre-order Nucleus? What's your website? And
the link is on the website now for the Crossing the Crevasse second edition and Within Graft second edition. Once Nucleus gets printed and I proof it and we actually get it listed, I'll have a live link on my website for that as well. My website is otherflocks.net. Otherflocks, one word, .net. So they will all be on Amazon.
Okay. And can they get it through Dimension Fold Publishing too?
I'm sure that's probably an option. I haven't discussed that with Ken, but I'm sure that would probably be an option.
Okay. And Michael, you're on many episodes of Ancient Aliens. You'll be on the Discovery Channel show Alien Encounters on June 19th at 10 p.m. Eastern. Okay.
On Discovery. Yeah. People can reach me at michaeljscarter.com. My Facebook fan page is Reverend Michael J. Carter. I will respond. I don't use my website much, but it's michaeljscarter.com. My new book, Enlightenment, is a book of sermons on philosophy, religion, social justice, race. And my other books are on Amazon and Barnes & Nobles.
Okay. Do you have any either one of you have any final words?
I'll throw one out.
Okay.
It goes right in hand with the Nucleus, and it's I guess a saying from Aristotle: knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. So let that resonate.
And I would just say, be not afraid.
Okay. Well, don't want the listeners to be afraid because we will have both of you back. So that should be a calming message to the masses.
Yeah, don't be afraid. Just don't be afraid. No matter what happens, don't be afraid.
All right. We got through that pretty quickly. We still have like 3 minutes. Wally, do you have any upcoming shows?
I'll be with Wayne and Michelle with the Michigan UFO podcast. That's coming up this Saturday.
Oh, okay.
That's the only one I have booked right now. I do want to throw something out if I could real fast.
Sure.
Has either of you all heard or seen what the retired Army Colonel Carl Neal said in an interview? He's the former director of the UAP task force. We're not alone. We've never been alone. And not only are we not alone, but they're actually interacting with us now. You would think that would be on the front page of the New York Times on every newscast, but you really have to search to find that. But it is out there, and we're getting the drips of information. I believe the faucet's opening up.
Cool. And that's a excellent point you made, Wally, about I think these your writings are opening up the faucets.
Well, thank you. That's actually one of the things I'm looking to I guess achieve is if I could just get people to open their minds and read things for themselves. It's so easy to be indoctrinated. Yeah. I mean, if 100 people that you value tell you that you're stupid, you're probably going to go around in life thinking that you're stupid, and that's not the case at all.
I think both of you are authors who heavily focus on opening your minds to all kinds of possibilities. And Michael, you are going to be at the Michigan UFO conference this September.
Yeah, you read my mind. Yeah, I'm going to be there. The third week in September. This is my third year. They keep calling me back. They'll be crazy. I'll say they're crazy. But yeah, it's from the 19th till the 21st. I'll be back there. It's always a fun time. And this is my third year in a row.
All right. So, okay, we're just about out of time. Thank you again, Michael and Wally, and thank
you, all. Thank Barbara. Thank you, Wally.
Yep. Enjoyed it, guys. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
We'll see you soon. All right. Have a great week, everyone.